Tonight is the 3rd of July, 2010. Tomorrow is a day that most people in the United States will think was ill-timed for it to happen on a Sunday. Tomorrow will be the 4th of July, Independence Day. And as has been tradition here at the Brilliantis Command Center, I would like this show to be about the thing that most Americans have taken for granted most of their lives. The thing that they love to talk about. The thing that they love to banter about. But they don't really understand what it is. I'm talking about, of course, freedom. We use freedom as an abstract selling concept, a talking point, a prop, a word to banter about that suggests that we are right and the other person is just plain wrong. We use it as a justification for stupidity and as a license to carry out its exact opposite. But what is it? Really and truly, what is freedom? The short answer is this. Freedom is a state of being. It is a condition whereby the individual is given the maximum opportunity to choose his or her destiny in society. That is it in a nutshell. How can you measure that? How can you determine whether or not you are really free? That in and of itself is a great question. Some people know that I am not only an internet radio personality, I am also a comic book fan and a comic book creator. And one of my personal favorite comic book characters is Superman. In the cartoon program Superman the Animated Series, there was a scene where Superman battled the ultimate tyrant in the universe, a man by the name of Darkseid. He goes toe-to-toe with the deity, and he manages to win. So there is this dramatic scene of Superman standing above Darkseid's palace, holding the bloody and beaten body of Darkseid over his head in victory, and tosses Darkseid to the ground in front of the people of the planet known as Apokolips. He then floats down and announces that he has defeated Darkseid, who has ruled over that planet with an iron fist for countless millennia, and that they, the people of that planet, are now free. The people of Apokolips then go over to their fallen tyrant, who at this time was barely alive, and they help him up, and they kindly carry him off to safety. And before he leaves, Darkseid gloats that he is known by many names in the universe, but on that planet of Apokolips, he is God. But in truth, Darkseid still commanded the loyalty of the people, not because he is God, but because they don't know any better. Countless generations of the people who have lived in abject misery and destitution, conditioned to obey the will of their leader and his lieutenants, without question. They had no idea what freedom is. Freedom was a mystery. In some cases, even an obscenity. And the same holds true here in the real world. There are people today that have never known freedom in any real sense. And if you were to tell them that they are free, they wouldn't have a single clue as to what that means. Our ancestors, people that were here when this country, when the United States of America was formed, they had no clue whatsoever to what freedom really meant back in the late 1700s. To them, freedom was simply, okay, the redcoats are gone and they're going to stop taxing us for everything. And if that sounds way too simplistic, it is because that is what most people back then thought freedom involved. And a lot of us have a similar definition of what freedom means today. We define it pretty much along the lines of, let us do our things and we'll be happy. It's completely subjective, though, because what we think the government should leave us alone, we then turn around, we have a problem with other people doing the things that we may not like. And I don't mean the obvious stuff, things like, robbing, raping, killing, So, how do we define freedom in any meaningful, objective way? Well, we have to look at the elements of freedom. Because freedom is nothing more than an abstract concept if there really is nothing behind it. You have to have substance for it to have meaning. And there are three key elements that make up freedom in society. Now, for those of you who have heard me talk about the subject before, you pretty much know what those three things are. And I'm going to be spending this hour going over each element, not only to show you how they fit in with the overall concept of freedom in society, but to also show you how you can destroy freedom through each of these elements. And that's also important, because these three elements form a perfect triangle when they balance each other out. Each element is important in their own way, and each of them keep the other two elements in check. So, before we go over the very first element, I'm going to tell you what is not an essential element in freedom, and that is democracy. Sounds strange, doesn't it? You hear politicians and talk radio and cable TV media personalities go on and on and on about how democracy is so friggin' vital to a free society. And quite often they will reiterate the fallacy, the myth, the friggin' fairy tale that democracy brings freedom to a society. It doesn't. Not only does it not bring freedom, but it is actually incapable of providing freedom in and of itself. Democracy is a mechanism. It is a means to a social or political end. It's like being handed a 5-gallon can of gasoline and being told that it is the exact same thing as being given a car. We know it's not. Democracy is not the same as freedom, and in fact, democracy in its purest form, it is nothing more than mob rule. It is tyranny by vox populi. America's founding fathers were very critical of democracy in and of itself to bring about that more perfect union, which is why they put up a lot of hoops and a lot of hurdles to that democracy. That was why we originally did not elect our U.S. senators, why they were up to the states, and why we still do not directly elect the president and the vice president, even though their names are on the ballots. It is because of those obstacles that they were then in place to restrain democracy for a much higher cause, namely freedom. But democracy does play a part in one of the actual elements of freedom itself, and that element is choice. We make a lot of choices every single day. We choose when to wake up. We choose whether or not we will hit the snooze bar on our alarm clock or heed that call from our pets or our kids to be fed. We choose whether or not we will go to school or go to work on time. We choose what we want to wear. We choose whether or not we will have breakfast, whether or not we will read the morning paper or just skim through the online version. We choose what to have for lunch, and we choose what to have for dinner. We choose what time we want to go to bed. There are a lot of choices that we make in our lives. And let's get really honest here. When you think about it, freedom is about making choices in your life and about your life. You choose what you want to read, what you want to say, what you want to believe in, whom you want to vote for. Those are all choices. You may have heard me talk about the power of the non-vote, but the truth of the matter is that choosing to not vote is still a choice that people make. When you know that there is an election coming up that you are qualified to take part in, and you consciously choose to not take part in it for whatever reason, then you have still made a choice. You have chosen to opt out and let other people decide the outcome of that election. It doesn't matter the reason behind it, you still chose. So one of the ways that we can accurately gauge freedom in a society is in the kind of choices we have in that society. For instance, Are you able to watch whatever you want to watch in the privacy of your own home? Able to subscribe to and read Playboy magazine? Listen to Shocknet Radio? Are you free to be a practicing Baptist or a practicing Jehovah's Witness? How about being a practicing Wiccan or a practicing Muslim? Those are all choices. We choose what is in our best interests. But the flip side to having choices is that we may choose something that other people don't want you to choose. Maybe you like to read Playboy magazine, but there are plenty of other people who do not. And they do not want you to be able to make that kind of choice at all. Oh, they'll tell you that they believe in the freedom of speech, but only when it is the kind of speech that they approve of. In other words, they don't really support the freedom of speech. They are hypocritical liars, but they don't have the courage to actually admit to that. So what they do is they invent a reason for taking choices away from people. They come up with excuses. Family values is the most common excuse. So-called community standards are manufactured, often defined by the very people who are taking away those choices. So if you want to destroy freedom, the easiest way to do it is to start taking away choices, or at the very least, give the illusion of the lack of choice. Look at the American political system. We are brainwashed into thinking that there are, have been, and always will be two, and only two, political parties in America. No more, no less. And yet, if you look at the various electoral ballots, if you look at history, you'd see far more than just two options. But those other options supposedly do not matter, and we are so brainwashed into accepting that myth that we will vote for someone who makes us sick to our stomachs than to vote for someone who truly reflects what we believe in if they are not a part of that two-party dominance. Even our old Cold War enemies, the Soviet Union, recognized the utter hypocrisy of our political system when they would have their own elections. And their elections were a whole lot easier to understand. Option A, vote for the Soviet Union. Option B, hard labor in Siberia and a vote for the Soviet Union. No wonder why option A would always win in a landslide. Look at the current discussions about the Tea Party movement. Despite the talk about wanting a third party, despite the talk about wanting independent candidates, what you are currently seeing is an illusion. These same people who are screaming about third parties and screaming about independent candidates are also saying, well, we don't really have time to form a third party. Never mind that there is a third and a fourth and a fifth and a 25th and a 255th. So we're just going to have to go with the GOP for now and get them to support our causes. In other words, the illusion of independence when there's still nothing more than lost lambs waiting only for their GOP shepherds to come get them. The very people that used to talk about wanting another choice are now starting to preach that there really is no choice at all. So, the first key element in freedom is choice. More choices you have, the better. And not just the choices that you would consider to be acceptable, but also the choices that you would consider to be the wrong choices. And the easiest way to get rid of freedom in society is to start limiting choices, or at the very least present the illusion of there being fewer choices. However, this is just the first part of the triangle that makes up freedom in our society. Choices are crucial, but choices are not enough. And I will cover the second element after this break.